Welcome back to New Zealand. As we all know, the Treaty Principles Bill is on the social conscience right now after the powerful 9-day hikoi across the North Island and the inspirational haka in protest at Parliament. Lots of people have questions about what all of this means, so we're going to break it down for you. We have a legal background, so we'll be looking at what the principles are and what the bill is trying to change. The Treaty Principles Bill has now passed its first reading because the National Party promised to support it through to the Select Committee. It's scary how easy it was for Luxon to gamble with Maori rights for a seat at the table. Good old democracy. So, what exactly are these principles? The principles of the treaty were developed because the English and Maori versions of the treaty don't quite say the same thing. Now, these discrepancies may seem small on paper, but they make the world of difference in context. Due to this, there was debate as to what the treaty was meant to say and how it should be applied. To uphold the spirit of the agreement, the Waitangi Tribunal took time to understand both versions and the history of how the treaty came about. Through the tribunal reports, we started to see common themes that became principles. These can be classed into three broad principles. The first being active protection. This is in reference to protection of the promises made in the treaty. This includes the Crown recognizing Maori rights and helping protect them. Second is the principle of exchange. This is about cooperation between both parties so they could coexist in harmony. This encompasses collaboration, conversation, and investigation when decisions of the Crown affect Maori interests. The final broad principle is partnership, which is obvious on the face of it, working together to do better for this land. The opposite of division. The idea of Tino Rangatirotanga was also understood to be an element of the treaty. The Crown knowingly entered an agreement that gave Maori self-control over their domains. Notice this is not co-governance. That's all well and good, but the tribunal can only make recommendations. Their reports have no legal effect, so why is any of this relevant? That's a good point. At first, New Zealand courts treated the treaty like any international agreement, whereby it must be ratified before being incorporated into domestic law. But this all changed when the State-Owned Enterprises Act came in. This was a piece of legislation made by Parliament which directly referred to the principles of the treaty. And just like that, the courts had access. That's because when Parliament referred to the treaty principles in legislation, they had impliedly ratified it and acknowledged its relevance. This opened the floodgates for the courts to incorporate the treaty and the principles of the treaty into law by way of the judgments they hand down. Now, to us, those principles seem pretty clear and easy to understand, right? Apparently not to the ACT Party. Did you notice we intentionally referred to the relationship between the Crown and Maori, not the government? The distinction is important because it's the Crown, those guys in England, that made this agreement with the Maori, not some government of New Zealand. The government's power is delegated from the Crown, but the founding document for that power is the treaty itself. Without the signatures on that agreement legally, the whole infrastructure ceases to exist, technically. This is why the treaty is so important, and why it's referred to as the founding document. This leads to questions as to whether the government even has the power to vary a document which gives it legitimacy. Can Parliament change the meaning of the document that brought it into existence? Let us know what you think. The Treaty Principles Bill is a cheeky name for it. It cloaks itself behind the principles and makes it seem like they aren't changing the treaty, just defining the principles. But as you know now, the principles are basically an agreed, workable interpretation of the treaty. Defining the principles is just a lazy, disrespectful way of saying they're trying to change the meaning of the treaty. The principles in the bill actually bear no relation to the commonly understood and widely applied principles. It's blatant disregard and should be called out at every possible opportunity. The first newly defined principle in the bill is called civil government, which basically means that the government and Parliament have full power to make all laws for everyone in New Zealand, a claim for sovereignty. The consensus, however, is quite the opposite. It's widely understood that Tino Rangatirotanga was granted by the treaty, which is something more akin to self-determination or self-governance for the Maori. The idea is that Maori were not signing away all of their rights, but saw this as a compromise to live together in New Zealand. That meant Maori controlled their domain and vice versa. But again, another video. The second principle is called Rights of Hapu and Iwi Maori. This says the Crown will respect these rights as of when the treaty was signed, which means there is an expiry date on rights, apparently. It states these rights, which are theirs alone, can only be granted if they have a treaty settlement. Again, locking up their rights behind expensive litigation, disadvantaging an already oppressed people, right in front of our eyes, in 2024. The last principle in the bill is equality, which seems to have come out of nowhere. The only place this could have come from is the part in the treaty that says everyone is granted the rights and protections of British citizens. This is funnily the only part of the treaty that is widely agreed in both versions, and they're trying to change that too? If you think about it, equality of the people had nothing to do with the treaty. It was a power-sharing agreement. So it seems they're plucking things out of thin air at this point just to stir division. Maybe Seymour's getting this confused with the Human Rights Act. The bill also states that these are the principles to be used to interpret legislation going forward, essentially undoing decades of work by the courts. They're trying to force the courts to comply with this ridiculous interpretation of the treaty. Talk about an abuse of power. There you have it. We hope you know more now than you did before you saw this video. You don't have to be a genius to guess our view on this, but what do you think? Do you think this is a rewrite of the treaty? Or something they're able to do within the bounds of their political power? Can there be legitimacy in an act that undermines their legitimacy? Let us know. Please make sure to make your submissions opposing the bill. You don't have to say much, just something polite along the lines of, "This bill attempts to undermine the rights of Maori and we do not agree with it." You've seen media downplay the hard work put in by Maori. This is how everyone can help. Parliament can't deny how many people opposed the bill if the submissions are staring them right in the face. They're expecting you not to speak up so they can sneak one through. It's up to New Zealand to show these fools this shit don't fly. Be sure to like, share and follow if you want to stay informed. We'll catch you next time something inspires us.